Archiving started.
All right, we'll just look at a very few slides of the ovary. That will be the only female reproductive organ we'll look at through the microscope. This first one is showing you a very low power, the scanning power of an ovary, and it's all of this area that I'm encircling. Okay, so all of that. Of course, that circle didn't draw just perfectly, but anyway, everything you see inside of there would be part of the ovary. And what you notice so much about it are these rounded areas. There you can see, here you can see, and then if you look towards the surface of the ovary, up in this cortex, you see the little tiny circles. Well, what these are follicles in various stages of development. I believe this particular slide is a mouse ovary, so mice produce a whole lot more offspring each time, so you're going to have a lot more follicles developing. It's important that you read about this development of the ovarian follicles in your textbook or go into your lecture notes on this before you start looking at it on the slides. I want you to notice just under the outer covering of the ovary, you see these tiny, tiny little groups of cells. Those are called primordial follicles. And under the influence of hormones from the anterior pituitary, those periodically, and in humans it's once a month, one of these will typically start maturing. And as it does, the process of oogenesis continues. Oogenesis in females would be analogous to spermatogenesis in males. And please note that it is pronounced oogenesis, not oogenesis, even though it's spelled oogenesis. It's oogenesis. That's kind of funny. But anyway, but these follicles in a female are with her when she's born, and they have already started that progress of oogenesis, and then they're halted. Inside each of these follicles is a cell called a primary oocyte, and that cell is the one that then will go through meiosis. Meiosis actually doesn't begin in humans until puberty, and then once a month during under the influence of hormones from the pituitary gland, one of these primordial follicles will start to mature, and that's the beginning of the formation of the ovum or the egg. Now, what you're noticing deeper in this particular slide in the ovary, you see some follicles that are in various stages of maturation. Let's see. This one, I guess it looks like it's probably one of the most mature of these. And right in the middle of that blue circle where I've got an arrow pointing, that's the cell that for lab you could call that the ovum, but technically from your lecture you'll know that that is the secondary oocyte. And that's the cell that's going to rupture from the surface of the ovary during ovulation. And then when it enters the fallopian tube, if sperm cells are present and fertilization takes place, then that secondary oocyte nucleus will continue meiotic division to produce the ovum nucleus, which then will unite with the sperm nucleus to form a zygote. All right, which is a lot more detailed than what I'm asking you for lab. For lab, you need to recognize that this is a maturing follicle, what you see drawn in blue or circled in blue, and that cell in the center there is the secondary oocyte, or for lab, you can call it the ovum, O-V-U-M. Now, if we move to another slide, here you're seeing the same slide on a higher power, and so it's a lot easier to see all the very numerous primordial follicles. And then you see a few maturing follicles right here. In some of these, you actually can see the cell inside, like this one I've put in 2 or 3 arrows on. And another one, you may not see the cell inside simply because of how it's been sectioned. And then you can see some pretty mature follicles here and here. And I want you to notice this cell. That's for lab, you can again call that the ovum. Technically, that's the secondary oocyte. Now, the next slide that I've got in your series here. It's a different slide of the ovary with different stains, but I don't want you to memorize colors. I want you to look at the particular features. I'm sure on this slide you can see just under the surface lots of these primordial follicles right there, right here, all along the surface. Okay, and then you see other follicles in various stages of development. The most mature of all of these follicles that you see here would be, let me erase that, I'm sorry, would be this one. All right, so that's a maturing follicle. Sometimes that's known as a Graafian follicle, capital Graafian. That's a Graafian follicle or mature follicle, and then you see the little immature ovum inside of that. Now, my next slide is the same one on a little bit higher power, and here you can see the ovum or secondary oocyte in the middle of this maturing follicle. All right, notice that it's filled with a lot of fluid, and that basically is going to build up and build up and build up until it literally pops from the surface of the ovary, and that's called ovulation. When that occurs, this part of it is going to be released from the ovary, which would include the little immature egg or oocyte, and then all of these little surrounding cells. Those are all the cells that the sperm have to penetrate through as a sperm fertilizes the egg. Go to your lecture notes and you'll learn all about that. On this last slide, here's another view of a very mature follicle. You should be able to pick out the immature egg or ovum or secondary oocyte. You can call it all of that for lab. You can see that right in the middle there. Do you see primordial follicles? Here they are. Okay, so when you see this on a lab quiz or a test, or if you see one of these follicles, you'll notice that the immature egg is not right in the center of it. You'll notice that it's here towards one edge of the follicle, but that's what you need to recognize for the ovary. Okay, that's it for these slides.
Archive recording.